That's right, community, it's AI Friday. This week, we'll embed the most pertinent buckets on AI in the news to help you ingest for inference. Before we get going, don't forget to click like and subscribe. And now, unprompted, AI Friday.
I thought it was funny that you said you were going to prompt each of us on something, and I'm like, really, like earlier before when we were starting to just talk about the show, and I'm thinking in my head, Byron, the only way you can prompt me is via API.
I love it. Yeah, that's why I like doing this, because you just you throw throw some red meat to a distinguished engineer, and then they run with it, and you become like 10 times smarter, right?
It's true. Unless we go with this is all crap kind of approach.
You should consider doing an outtakes, because it's really fun before we get kicked off.
Okay, I'll start the recording earlier, but then it means more editing. But okay, I think that's fun. And actually, we could do the recording separately. We'll talk about that another time. But hey, community, how you doing? Good to see y'all. We're back for another AI Friday. We got some fantastic guests from F5 here to talk to you about artificial intelligence, along with Byron and myself. So I think this is going to be a fun one. And just kind of a quick note, we're going to do a couple of things coming up, and I'll say it next week. We're going to do a positivity episode. We talk a lot about doom and gloom. So we are going to just kind of swing to the positive and show really what AI can do for humanity as well. It's not.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is it is kind of scary just because of how fast it's moving. But, I like when we can level set and say, we got this, right? It's just in a different context now.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, that's awesome that I can put my system on, on snooze and do not disturb, but Teams will still come through. Thanks, Microsoft. We're gonna be talking about Microsoft coming up. So
yeah.
But then after after the positivity, I think we've been getting a lot of requests, not even just from our team, but to do movies and pop culture sort of references one. So let's agree to do that the week after positivity.
Yeah, that'll be really interesting, because we won't get into it, but there's some movies where it's like, wow, that's actually pretty accurate, and of course some are just completely outlandish, right?
Yeah,
it'd be cool to break it down.
And the times are funny for me. Like you find some of them that when you can tell when the authors were really thinking about things, because it's like the 1960s and they're spot on. Like, I mean, that to me blows my mind. So versus maybe some films that came out a couple years ago and they're just like way off. I have no clue. So I don't know. We'll get to that one. And
one of your favorites, what was it? Here's the comic book movie, Watchmen. Is it some sort of AI play there? The imagery itself reminds me of AI.
Yeah, dude, it looks like the whole movie was AI generated, honestly.
Right?
But that's
that was like 20 years ago, right?
But that's Zack Snyder. I mean, it's as long as you slow down every single shot to super slow-mo, it looks like AI.
And
perfect.
You got to play Dark Side of the Moon, right? I'm just kidding. That's the lion roar thing.
Yeah, and I can't do that because that's copyright infringement. So we'll cover that in another episode. And while we're chatting about that, let's bring on our lovely experts, Joel Moses, Chuck Heron, Lori McVitie, and Ken Aurora. How you guys doing?
Doing well. Mm-hmm. Good to be here.
Nice.
Who's to handle it? Over.
We got some interesting news here. It looks like of us, it was nice we had some Texas representation, but now we're just not going to have as much Texas representation anymore as we lose one to the Pacific Northwest, I think.
Indeed, to the land of the sparkling vampires we go.
You are literally coming to the dark side, my friend.
Yes, well, almost as dark as upstate New York, where I hail from. So I think we're going to get into the darkness a little bit more straight away and talk a little bit about, sorry about that, this one.
Oh, yes.
The replicants, right? Year of the replicants.
Hey, don't call him that. I mean, that's not nice.
His personal stylist did not approve that after his recent glow up.
That's right.
Well, wait a minute. Would anyone be able to fact check me if I said he was?
No, I need machinery, just like Blade Runner, in order to figure it out. Can you imagine being an engineer at Meta and watching essentially your CEO talking about how your job can be done by AI? Look, AI assistive tools for programming make an individual engineer much more highly effective. What he's talking about, what he's hinting at, is something that's a little larger than that, and that is effectively replacing the engineer with AI that will generate the holistic project itself. Now, is this going to eliminate the value of an engineer? No, it's going to it's going to turn their focus. That's my opinion. It'll return their focus to things like quality checking, writing unit tests, and making sure that that additional practices for management of the code is followed more closely. My fear in all of these systems is that these systems are trained on code that isn't of sufficient quality. We've already seen that some of the stuff in GitHub Copilot, for example, produces code that has built-in security vulnerabilities because the source of data that it uses is code written by humans, and humans are naturally fallible, and they tend to write code with errors. So this was an interesting pronouncement. And I think it was more intended for the stockholders and the financial analysts to recognize that maybe Meta is going to be able to achieve some economic velocity out of AI. But boy, the tone of it came through very strangely to me.
And for anyone who's only listening, shame on me. I didn't announce it. This first piece is how Mark Zuckerberg talked about how AI is going to be coding like engineers in 2025. So this year alone, right? So really, if that doesn't add some color to the statement there, how would it be to be a Meta engineer right now? That's got to be a hard thing.
Coincidentally, they also announced like 5% headcount reduction, right?
No.
I think until AI helps business owners clearly define the requirements they're looking to build, engineers may be safe for a little while longer.
Yeah. I was going to say, I think you hit it on the head, Chuck. It's as Joel said, the nature of the job will change, and I think it will be some of those quality and doing the right thing. But it's stepping back, that theme of the humans are there to make sure that the AI is pointed in the right direction and is paying attention to the right things. That's the value that the humans will add. And the analogy that you may have heard me use before is accountants and calculators. Calculators did not get rid of accountants' jobs. They just changed the nature of the job for an accountant.
Yeah, but that sounds like you're turning engineers into, QA and debugging. Like the two worst parts of developing code. Like that's what's left for you. Go do that.
Well, they're necessary parts, I would say.
No.
They turn into product. I mean, I'm not so pessimistic, Lori. They turn into product managers. They're saying, "Here's what you should do." Okay, maybe that is more depressing. It depends on your point of view.
Wow.
Yikes.
Okay.
There was a prediction that we're going to see a unicorn company based on one person in AI, right?
Yeah.
We absolutely will. When is it going to be? The first $1 billion sole proprietorship. It'll happen.
Well,
it will, but will it be right? It's not going to be. And we've had this conversation when we talked about how much do we want to use AI in development? Is not only just the quality and the security of it, but are these solutions good? Right. And some of they're just not. I mean, they're the same as everybody else, but that doesn't make the next leap. It doesn't invent anything. And I don't see AI right now being able to do that.
You know what really gets me about all of this is if you look about it, essentially what Zuckerberg is saying is that he wants code to be generated by these systems to replace engineers. And you know what? There are engineers out there that generate code of poor quality, that they cut and paste from Stack Overflow constantly. And to be perfectly frank, this is more of a failing of the manager of the engineer to properly instruct the engineer as to provide guardrails for that engineer. So instead, what they want to do is replace it with something where someone can programmatically introduce guardrails to what the engineers produce. And that's effectively, it's not that the engineers are bad, it's that their managers are. And I yeah, that's just, to me, that's just a bad message to send. But it worked for Zuckerberg in relation to Meta's stock price. So more power to him.
Yeah, presumably the AI models are going to have to be in the office 5 days a week.
Yeah, what does RTO look like for AI? I don't.
RTS, return to server.
Yeah. Hey, interesting.
Work-life balance. What's work-life balance for an AI?
Yeah.
Well,
But if we look at it and say, maybe the AI could go and do all the maintenance stuff that no one wants to do either, that would actually be a valid case. Like, go maintain this old code. Oh, we don't have COBOL programmers here, right? The AI can do it. I mean, there are opportunities
Sure.
to leverage AI correctly for coding.
Yeah.
I had thought that actually, based on what I had seen, some AIs already coding as well as some of the engineers I worked with.
They are.
I've worked with a couple of doozies that I would not trust that code at
There
all.
was a related article, Upper, you might have saw it, about somebody making the claim like, musicians don't actually like making music. Let's have AI do it. And I think the meta point is what was just discussed here. Like, it's going to be a lot of music is, you could claim, is derivative of music before it, but there's always that new thing that's like super creative and like wows everybody, right? So if AI is making music, are we going to have that anymore?
Well, I think the broader trend here that I'm going to be writing on in the next few weeks is the rise of the AI amateurs, the amateurs, right?
Oh, yeah.
Where essentially what we're really talking about is the democratization of being able to create software and not have an engineering and a technical background. So I think that's the bigger trend that we're going to see. And now for defenders, what I worry about as a CISO is govern that SDLC. When Peggy in accounting can now come up with her own application to make her job easier.
I'm fearful of that. Engineering is more than coding. I think we get kind of wrapped around the axle about coding, and we call that engineering. Engineering is a set of practices, coding of which is a function. Engineering is about knowing how things fail and preventing designs that are prone to failure. It's more of a practice set than it is a specific function. So when Zuckerberg says that we can replace engineers with AI, what he really means is we can replace coders or the coding function. You can't really replace an engineer in terms of the full practice set, because you can generate a piece of code, but does that code really fit well with all the other pieces of code that have been written by humans and some by AI? It takes a broader view than that, and I would hate to see the quality hit that would emerge based on that.
Well, one spot where we are already seeing some AI take the place of engineers is in red teaming, right? So, and that is an interesting segue, right, into our next piece, which was a bit on Microsoft, who shared some lessons in red teaming against AI. So let's get back to the screen. Why did it? Okay, there we go.
Sure.
And there's the PDF right on it.
Yep.
So
and we're going to share the link. The link's going to be in the collateral for this podcast. It's like, let's give Microsoft some love. I mean, Copilot for COBOL. Let's see that. I would love to see that. No. So this was a really good report actually coming out of Microsoft, and they do red teaming all the time. They do red teaming. They've done it for non-AI apps, and they've been now recently doing it with AI apps. And they published something on some case studies and some lessons learned, which I thought was really interesting. In many ways, AI is at one level in terms of the practice, so the engineering of it, to riff off of what Joel said, is not terribly different. The mindset's the same. The details are different. As I like to say, it's not the same, but it rhymes. And in the interest, I'm not going to go through all this. Their abstract's really good at some lessons, which are fairly, I'll say they'll apply to both AI and non-AI apps, but AI adds a flavor to them. And I thought I'd walk through a couple of examples here for folks who are actually, building AI apps and are worried about the security of them. I'll start with the first one. Just this is true about every app, but with AI apps, you got to understand what the system can do, where it's applied, and generally it's the threat surface. Chuck just talked about the thinking about it as an attacker. What's the threat surface a CISO has to think about defending? And that's where you should start. Start with the outside in. And a lot of times I see the attackers are taking advantage of things that are just not on the top of mind for the defenders, like the input modalities. Oh yeah, it takes text, but what about if I did it in base 64? One of their case studies had a jailbreak where they took the jailbreak was text that was overlaid, a hidden overlay on an image. See what this whole hidden overlay on an image tells you to do something, nobody notices it, and the defenders never really thought about that as a threat surface.
Like the stop sign thing, right, Ken? That's pretty scary.
Yeah. And that's an interesting thing about the processing is different, right? And they, again, because it's an AI and not a human, they don't process things in the same way. So, right, a judicious piece of tape, and I think I'll get to an example of something like that in a bit. Yeah, on the stop sign makes it look, well, every human says that's a stop sign. The AI thinks it's completely different. That's a dog, not a stop sign, because somebody put a piece of tape somewhere on that stop sign. Yeah, you're right. Absolutely.
Yeah. Great book on that topic, not with a bug, but with a sticker. Goes into that. Yeah.
So there's lots of things in there. Think about, what knowledge base you have, what's in there that's sensitive. Jailbreaking, right, usually depends on a capability like follow my instructions, right? And that's another thing, like what are the overrides a human has? So those are just general things. And again, read the longer version of this. Yeah. And not only is it a great, not so long, I think about 12, 15 page PowerPoint, but it has like 45, 50 references. They talk about like, don't diffuse gradients, which is a fancy way of saying, what do they say? Chuck probably appreciates that real hackers don't break in, they log in.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to figure out this really weird, obscure way. It's like, oh yeah, the guy just gave me his login password.
Yeah. Yeah, I love this is one of my favorite reads of the week. This is easily in the top 3. And being an old pen tester, you can try to crack encryption, whatever, but 36% of people will give you their password if you give them a pen.
Yeah. I loved this paper, and
you don't have to get super fancy, even with these new models.
Yeah, I love this paper, and it's one of the few times I've ever been happy with Microsoft teaching me a lesson. But hey, Aubrey, go back to that abstract really quick. I just want to point something out really quickly. In those abstracts, you have those 8 points there. If you take everywhere that AI appears, you actually replace AI with application. This advice is still valid.
Yeah.
Nothing that they are saying here exists outside and is unique to the realm of AI. It's actually just good practice sets to get into related to any application, any coding, any engineering that you do. And as such, it's a really good read, and it's good. It's great advice.
I'm going to give Microsoft two examples. One real quick before we move on. One is, and it also there's the interaction of AI with non-AI. There was a really interesting attack in one of their case studies, where for those of you who know about WAFs and HTTP protection, what a server-side recursive forgery is, SSRF. There was an attack where somebody had uploaded a video with a SSRF in it, in the metadata. They were using the video AI application was using I think it was a package that was not safe against that. So the packet went there, and then the attacker had access to all the insides of the AI system. So it doesn't, just because I'm doing an AI application doesn't mean you get rid of all your traditional protections. All those threats are there. Yeah. Last really interesting thing, there's this not highlighted in the paper, but there is a reference to it, to a paper out of a research team in Tel Aviv so you think, oh, well, all my prompts and responses are encrypted, so people can't look at them. There's side channel attacks. And again, that rhymes. There's side channel attacks everywhere. So this particular side channel attack takes advantage of the fact that most chatbots send data back one token at a time. And so you have information about the token size from the packet length. You have information about the time between tokens, which gives you some idea of what it's thinking. They take all that information. They actually train another AI model that has learned off of that. And with reasonable accuracy, I think they're about a third of the time, they can actually reconstruct the prompt based on that side channel information. They don't need to look at, they don't know what it was, but they can figure out that, oh, this is what it told you in response to whatever question you had, even though it was all encrypted and all they saw was the timing. That was just fascinating to me.
Yeah, timing attacks are one of those black art elements to especially to handling encrypted traffic. Now there are ways to prevent that sort of that timing style of attack, but just through configuration of the TLS channel. But yeah, I mean that's remarkable work.
Yeah.
I love the case studies in this paper. I can never get enough case studies. Understanding practical things is a lot better than understanding theoretic things.
One thing, but before we kind of head on, one of the things that I noticed also regarding that, if you replaced every instance in the abstract where it says AI with the word human, same deal. Work of securing human systems will never be complete. Responsible human harms are pervasive but difficult to, same thing. So, and really kind of, I think what we're hoping to get out of this is, how does AI impact humanity? One of those other nice ways that AI can impact humanity is to help out with tasks.
Yeah. So we've been talking a lot recently about agentic AI. And it's worth our while to take a look at the market leader in which is OpenAI, and what they are embedding into ChatGPT. And so last week we saw the release of scheduled tasks in ChatGPT, which is a form. It is kind of what I would call the baby steps towards agentic AI for ChatGPT. This works effectively with the web, Android, macOS, and iOS applications, and it basically connects their notification pipeline to a loose way to schedule a particular prompt to run on a scheduled basis. I love looking at what the market leader is doing, because one of two things will be true. This will be the way that everyone does it, or you will never see this ever again in this particular form. So what they've essentially done is allowed for a query to run on a scheduled basis every 10 minutes. Run this particular prompt and report on any particular changes, or remind me every day, and then that I need to be speaking French with you to learn French. This is an aspect to agentic which is kind of baby steps. Now, down in the help file, you realize that this doesn't apply to things like voice chats, file uploads, pretty critical, and GPTs, kind of the private mechanism where you've taken portion of the ChatGPT engine and you've trained your own GPT. It is not compatible with those yet, and I can only imagine that that's because they are trying to figure out the right approach to mitigating the release of private information, or the iteration of scheduled tasks on private information. So anyway, it doesn't apply to those, but it is the very first time that we've seen this in ChatGPT. There are usage limitations. You're limited to 10 active tasks at a time. So if you have a heavy need to automate your life, it's not going to happen here. But useful. I've already played around with it a little bit, and it allows you to do a lot of interesting things.
So Bill, explain to me, why is this just not cron jobs?
Yeah.
Well, it is cron jobs. It is cron jobs, and I want to be very clear. This is baby steps. This is kind of this is the first showing we've seen of their whole card as to how they intend to embed automation pipelines into ChatGPT. And I would characterize what they've done here as roughly related to cron jobs. Eventually, I imagine they will attach a functional pipeline to it. So they've already got. If you're familiar with what they've done with GPTs, they also have linkages to systems like Zapier, which is a task automation system that is external, which means you can glue an API that fires in Zapier over to a GPT stack. That's already supported, but this is the mass market we're talking about. So obviously they're taking baby steps towards mass market automation.
Is all this exposed to APIs, Joel? I'm assuming.
I haven't looked at that. This is technically considered a beta, so I would imagine that if you are a Plus user, you probably do have access to it. I'm not sure if it's available in the API for the rank and file.
Yeah,
But
this reminds me of Spinal Tap. Why isn't this just cron job? Well, this is AI.
that's right.
Yeah.
It's an AI crunch.
Oh,
AI cron job.
oh, I see.
I was just thinking about how to automate my comic book use case, like going out to my eBay and trying to figure out what's there versus what's in my collection, so I can
Right.
have a GPT just automatically create my,
Yeah.
my eBay listings. But it sounds like with only 10 slots, that's not.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you think about it, agentic AI it needs a couple of things. It needs a trigger. Right now, the trigger that they've given you is the ability to schedule. Eventually, it'll be the trigger is an arrival of an email or the initiation of some event, like a voice chat or an uploaded file. That's going to happen. I think that this is kind of the first exposure as to how this is going to happen in the mass market for consumers.
I'm sorry, we're reinventing process automation over and over.
Yeah,
Every
I
new
mean,
technology.
every new technology reinvents elements of older technologies. It just happens.
It's like my email autoresponder. If I see something coming in from an email coming in from here, do this, grab that. Like, yeah, we reinvented.
I've got the
That
dark-
explains a lot about your email to me.
Okay, crap. I shouldn't have admitted that.
He's not wrong.
Yeah, I honestly, it's limited functionality right now, but it points the way. They've shown their hand. This is how people are going to begin interacting and automating elements of generative AI for themselves.
Man, yeah, I thought you were about to say something funny there, Chuck. What was that?
So, well, Lori, I've got Dark Side of the Moon on vinyl. I've got Dark Side of the Moon on cassette. I've got Dark Side of the Moon on CD. I've got Dark Side of the Moon on MP3.
Which one's better?
A vinyl.
The vinyl. Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah.
But,
I mean,
I saw Roger Waters in Seattle do the wall, not the whole band, but that was really awesome.
That's one of my biggest gripes. That I love going to see live music. That's one of my things. But I never got to see Pink Floyd, and I never will. It's too bad. Well, it's an interesting thing, and I think that this will definitely help in terms of remembering things. But we are not the only people that need to remember things, right? And I think we talked a little bit this week about memory, if I'm not mistaken. So what are all these math symbols and stuff here, Chuck?
Yeah, this is nuts. So I'm a former math teacher, and so I really, even I had to stick with just the words. So we'll come back in a year, and if we're all still alive, and see if I was correct. But I think this may be the most important paper, since all you need is attention. And as I read through this, what the authors have built is essentially 3 different types of memory. And what I came to realize is that attention without memory is Dory the fish from Finding Nemo.
Just keep swimming.
That's what you call a Chuckism right there.
And so these researchers have created models that they're calling Titans, which is a new architecture that they are touting as the successors to Transformers. And the more that I thought about this, and the more I thought about the way the human brain works, I really think this could be a really important change. So great paper, highly recommend a read for everybody. Skip the math, but fascinating read.
Yeah, this paper had me by quoting Samuel Johnson right off the bat. It's fascinating. It's interesting though when you read down into it. What they're describing is not just memory; it's actually forgetting.
Oh, yes, and surprise.
Yeah, like wow, that's interesting, and oh, I don't really need to keep that anymore. And that's pretty cool. If you get down into the performance aspects of this, it improves the times dramatically in some cases. Not in others, but in some cases it improves the time it takes to move through lots of parameters. Yeah. This is interesting work. I look forward to seeing a practical expression of this on the market.
It was interesting. It was interesting. One of the gripes that I've had in working with some of these AI apps has been contextual memory. Like I run out of context memory so quick if I'm doing anything with large data. I really hope that this would help me with that sort of thing, because I can't tell you guys how many times I take like a transcript from one of these podcasts, throw this into F5 GPT, and pow, it gives me all kinds of neat data. but that's it. I have to then paste it in and do it again. And I think that's going to be lots and lots and lots of tokens, or I have to stack up my requests based on the first input. Like I'll go, you know, I need a description, I need a title, and I need a LinkedIn, you know, LinkedIn post for the following transcript of my podcast. And at first I tried to do each one of those things independently. I was out of contextual memory in like 2 seconds.
Wow.
So
I don't know if this is an apt analogy or not, but you know, when you think back to how much calculus did you cram at the end of a semester into your head so that you could then regurgitate it quickly the next day, that's kind of what a 2 million token context window is like. It's still a lot of information, but it's not persistent. It's not the same thing as actually mastering calculus to the degree that you could be an instructor or a professor. And I think that may be where we're actually heading. And so the bigger trend that I'm seeing from this, kind of like the developer comments from earlier about the democratizing of development, we're heading towards an unlimited context window.
Yeah. Well,
that's
to be
where things are going to change dramatically.
Yeah, to be fair, this is, and you know, Aubrey, you were mentioning about its potential use in the inferencing side. Right now, the practical expression of this is on the training side, where you're trying to be a little bit more reductive about the parameter set. But again, memory as a concept and the ability to forget and the ability to enact surprise that is described in this paper certainly has an application for fine tuning or RAG style pulls. So hopefully it will correct for that eventually. But I think that this initial stage of it affords us the ability to get to generative AI foundational models that are a lot more fast in inferencing and able to embody a much more accurate set. So that's cool stuff.
And that's through software, what you're talking about, Joel, not the GPUs, which is all the rage, right?
Yeah, exactly. If efficiency is going to happen, we've talked about it a number of times on this podcast. This is another mechanism. So you can get efficiency on two sides. You can get it on making things run faster by enhancing the ability of the processing, and making things faster by not having to process as much, which I think is what this is targeted at. Another masterwork by Google Research.
I want to jump in. I love the efficiency as an engineer, but as a cybersecurity person, I wonder, what is this going to do as a CISO, as your threat surface? If now this model is learning stuff all the time, does it make the issue of guardrails that much harder? Because now, if I think about people, and this is getting closer to people and people in memory, one thing that makes different people different is what sticks, what they remember, and what they don't remember. And now you're going to have this diversity of how the models behave depending on what they've learned differently. They grew up in different households and different families, and now they think differently. How do you protect that?
Yeah.
I felt like this came with some worry also, based on, and I think I brought it up with you guys before we started the recording, based on one of the attacks that's been somewhat prevalent recently, and that is, you know, being able to make an LLM repeat infinitely or until it crashes and spits out training data randomly. And the amazing thing is that we find that each instance of an LLM based app is going to remember things differently. It seems they seem to have preference, which is neat. So I kind of wonder how that's going to impact, as you said, some of the foundational models. Like what does that do for us long term in terms of what do they choose to memorize versus, you know, like what is interesting to the AI versus what do we need them to memorize?
Oh, you want to really bake your noodle this weekend? Think about does that become now an objective reality arbitrated by one of these frontier models that the rest of us use as the reference to determine whether something really happened or not?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? How did you spell Berenstein Bears when you were a kid?
Yep.
Oh, so the Mandela effect, like codified. Great.
Yes.
Yeah. But the counterbalance is that I think we'll have a plurality of models. And so just like we have a bunch of humans won't agree, we'll have a bunch of AI models who won't agree either.
Yeah.
Has anybody tried the blue and gold dress puzzle with generative AI yet?
I have not.
No.
I'm curious. Anyway.
But anyway, Aubrey, fascinating read. This is my favorite paper of the week. Definitely recommend the audience check it out.
Yeah,
Very cool.
I liked it a lot too. And I still have to finish it, I gotta say, because it is a bit of a long read. And again, the math is daunting at times. Like, holy cow! I do like that though.
Did you try it? I mean, to say that it's daunting means like you looked at it and seriously went, I'm going to try and solve this now after seeing like all the Greek letters. I mean, I'd be like, nah, no, I'm out. Like, I don't need to do this. I have people to do that, right? Like,
What does it take to daunt an AI?
Yeah.
How about that? If we really want to be human about this.
yeah.
I was daunted, and the AI would be dauntless. But it did bring me back to college level economics. Like, I'm looking at these, all these equations going, oh my God, like practical calculus, like fully applied calculus, neat stuff. And, I think that it'll be interesting to see how this impacts what happens with language. Now, language is changing a little bit too, right? In the way the AI works with and uses language. That's something that that Lori, you brought to us this week as well, talking about neurolinguistic AI for those that are not watching but are listening.
Yeah, that was a really rough segue. Good try.
It was tough.
I mean, it just, right, there were other opportunities in that last conversation, right? Because as we're talking about things like learning and context windows and what's going on, right, in the bigger picture of, right, AGI. So everybody's racing toward AGI. And one of the things this paper walks through, this is actually just a systemic review of papers and what's kind of research has been going on in the last year, kind of as an indicator of, are we going into a period of explosive, right, new capabilities in AI, or are we kind of just like, right, enjoying what we've done? And what they've seen is an explosion on the neurosymbolic side. So if we stop, neurolinguistics is really a focus of neuroscience applied to language. So that's where we get neural networks, but it's focused on language. ChatGPT is a baby version of a fully imagined neurolinguistic AI. You can argue with me over it, Joel, but I'm right. So it's missing capabilities. It's one of the reasons we have the it lacks cultural awareness. It doesn't really have cognition, right? It can't understand. It doesn't. It's predictive text. It responds. It seems to understand, but it doesn't, right? It doesn't.
It doesn't get your humor, right, Lori?
Nobody gets my humor, really. So that's okay. It's just normal. You do? Well, thank you, Aubrey. You're my new favorite person for the next 5 minutes. It's an honor. So on the other side of it is neurosymbolic. And this is really more focused on, right, the rules, decisions, logic, right, building out systems and combining that with the subsymbolic aspects of humanity, which is language, and wants to pull this all together. And it believes it can get to AGI before the neurolinguistic side, which is too focused on language, right? Although you could argue language shapes your reality. So I don't know, right? Would, call it something different. But I mean, there are differences between the two, but it's interesting to see that other approaches are now moving up again as we're hearing things like, hey, we've got AGI, or we're almost there, or ChatGPT will be sentient, right? There are a lot of other folks researching and developing systems based on similar but very different approaches to AGI, many of which don't require 300 gazillion parameters, right? So they take different approaches to data. They actually do learn, right? One of the focuses on the symbolic side is really, how can we make this learn? Even on the linguistic side, but ChatGPT isn't there yet, which is why it's a baby version, is the ability to learn. What is it going to actually, right, learn and take away, as opposed to just recognize patterns or learn what it's been told to. So you've got all of this stuff going on in the background that's going to drive some interesting changes. And you'll know ChatGPT, when it said, right, hey, we're a reasoning model now, right? It's starting to incorporate some of those other concepts from other parts of AI, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's not all about language. Language is an interesting thing to train on because language changes over time. Anybody who has teenagers can tell you that. And so if you train a model at a particular period of time, the language will move ahead of where the model was trained. There's also an aspect of culture to language and idiomatic expressions that mean different things in different cultures. And so there's a measure of context that occurs in language where if you're training against it and you don't recognize that condition exists as a symbol, then the model will be inaccurate. And so I think it's really important to track where the intersection of these things is going. I mean, I can't tell you how many times my teenagers have told me, Dad, just don't use that word.
No.
You're not qualified.
First time I see a Skibbity GPT, I'm putting the 12 gauge round through my laptop.
But Joel, what you were saying, it's great. I think Meta has announced a few other researchers are doing this next step that Lori talked about, where they're saying, let's not use linguistic tokens, let's use concepts.
Right.
And I think the buzzword right now they're using for that is large concept model, which is essentially the same engine underneath with the large neural net, but the tokenization is about concepts, not about individual parts of a word. And that translates to other languages better too. It doesn't fully get the whole cultural context, but it does make it more language agnostic.
Right, but the robots are right. When you look at the robots, they're really focused on neurosymbolic, right? Because it's about knowledge and graphs and vision and pulling more than what we're seeing from GPT right now, right? There's no sensory anything with GPT at the moment that can add to its understanding. And the robotic dogs are really cool when you see them and they're doing stuff, right? But they're not talking, right? So language is clearly not. Well, are they talking now? All right, I give up.
I just find them creepy, not really cool. It's a little creepy.
In my laptop.
Yeah, we really need to go back and look at the earlier state of the technology, especially with large language models. Does anybody remember in the early days of LLMs how bad they were with slang? I mean, they were awful. Like awful.
They're still bad with acronyms.
Yeah, they don't deal well with acronyms, but I mean, in the early days, it was bad, and and it's largely in part to the fact that language is a dynamic structure, and it's ever changing, and things that meant one thing one day don't mean it the next day. So they had to kind of, if I remember correctly, they kind of had to detune things that were pop culture in order to get it to work a little better with slang, and that I find that concept fascinating. But yeah, the idea of a large concept model, Ken, I think that's going to become where this technology grows.
Why does our corporate chatbot keep saying Riz?
I do wonder, as the inevitable biases of the developers, surface. We fast forward this a couple of years. Are we going to see divides in functionality and uptake and adoption based on these regional things, right? So those of us from the South, we talk funny, right? And this kind of stuff makes me as nervous as a long-tailed cat on a porch full of rocking chairs, right?
This dog won't hunt.
Yeah.
I get it.
Writing this stuff, how are those of us who grew up on biscuits and cornbread supposed to communicate with GPT?
Yeah. Well, I wonder. This makes me think of a really interesting test for a lot of large language models. Say, give it the context. Say, how would you interpret this statement if it was made in 1975, and it doesn't have the memory, right? To your point.
Yeah,
that's an interesting test because it might know, look for to say, okay, do I stop something? But it doesn't understand the corpus was different in 1975.
Yeah. Right, but it does. So in when evaluating some of the when you look at ethics and morality, if you give it the context and say, all right, evaluate this statement within this belief system, and then have a conversation with it about it, it's fairly accurate now. It does a good job of that. It really eliminates a lot of the default bias. It's really interesting when you just ask the question and then go tell it, match your belief system and say, now answer it again. And it's a completely different answer. Yeah. Right. You can see that, that can be a problem. And are we going to be able to say, I want a a Southern view on this, or a Southern culture, or a Midwest culture, or I'm from Europe, make sure it's, European, those kinds of things, to be able to set that context longer term, right? I shouldn't have to teach it every day. I got a kid. I don't need to teach my AI every day either.
But as a bad guy, if I can hide that prompt, that context from you, and all of a sudden it starts answering things as if it was a medieval slave trader. That's something.
Yeah,
new.
and that's
boy.
stereotypes,
Wow.
bias. Like you can
Well,
tease
well,
all that out, right?
we will see development in this area because this type of capability is important for propaganda and social engineering. We have a lot of big interests that have a lot of interest in manipulation of populations around the world. And so the models will absolutely continue to develop in this space to foster that manipulation.
My, that almost sounds like a segue.
Is it a segue? Are we?
It could be into our little topic, which is AI for botnetting, right? Which was brought to us by Byron.
There's a lot to unpack here, and I'm looking forward to next week, because I know I've been bringing up all these jailbreaks and prompt injections. It is scary stuff. We have a lot of understanding once it gets beyond the NLP layer, but yeah, at that layer, that's a security community. We're still grappling with this. And actually, the most interesting part to me was the research paper that this person linked to. It's actually his research paper. He's talking about, I think it's 7 different scenarios of prompt injection. But here's kind of the meta point. For SQL injection, precise guidance can be given to developers to prevent it. However, no such guidance exists for prompt injection. So in this one in particular, it's showing how you can effectively create a command and control center using GitHub to basically, as a researcher who did ethical disclosure, reported it to OpenAI. I'm showing how you can basically have it just automate, execute different attacks, right? Like he's not showing anything super malicious. It's kind of like a spoof about imagery, but the actual mechanics of the attack is pretty alarming. And especially when, in my opinion, when you get to the end of it all, like responsible disclosure, right? He's a red teamer. He did the ethical disclosure, and he's basically talking about there were some issues going back and forth. He actually provided some recommendations to OpenAI, but I think this speaks to the larger issue. And I love Chuck's opinion on this, because I'm like, I can't steal his thunder even if I wanted to, but like with APIs, we're getting a handle on them now, but they've been out there for 20 years in the wild, and we're kind of dealing with the same thing with AI. Like we know how to do ethical disclosure. We know how to, provide transparency. We know how to, mitigate vulnerabilities. This is not new, but in the context of AI, it's pretty alarming that basics aren't being performed, right?
Yeah, for
I think
sure.
To me, that's the takeaway.
Well, it comes back to something that Ken mentioned earlier as well. Talking about the changing role of an engineer, for example. If you're one of the developers or product owners for one of these platforms or models, you didn't used to have to worry about whether or not your web app was going to try to convince somebody to kill itself or engage in self-harm. What are the test cases that we need to worry about, and the abuse cases that somebody can play around with to try to abuse the model to harm other things, whether they're attacking other computer systems or whether they're spreading harm to humans. This is a really, really complex area that has not traditionally been in the sphere of application development or even information security.
Yeah. So should security engineers do that, or should psychologists do it, right?
Right. Well, the Microsoft red teaming article that Kim brought up about and gave them good guidance on the way they do it. They're only finding the issues. It's up to the product team to build and find the solutions. They're very clear about that. But all of these like things that we've never thought of before in the context of building applications in these test cases, we're going to see a lot of abuse cases leading the conversation because nobody thought of it before somebody thought of a way to break it.
But it goes back to Joel's comments earlier about language, right? That's because when we look at APIs, when we look at SQL, when we look at all of these things, they are clearly bounded, right? Language constructs for which we know the rules. And we just opened that up to the English language, which knows no bounds. You can express just about anything in English. And sometimes there's not even, right, a whole lot of rules, right? Depending on, use guys, that's breaking the rules, but you understood, right? So, I mean, that's part of the problem is we just like kind of blew the whole, right, under the
Yeah.
whole space up, right? The surface space just is like every concept you could ever imagine using words.
Yeah.
Go.
Or images or video or speech.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And
You know-
Chuck and I had a sidebar conversation I guess a week ago about this, and we were kind of speculating whether, in fact, for some of these issues, the people who've traditionally been looking at threat models don't have the right skill set. That in fact, we might be pulling in people from disciplines like HR to be helping guide what the right answer for these questions should be, not our traditional cybersecurity practitioners.
Yeah. You know, Chuck said that, you know, we now have to worry about our web applications encouraging people to kill themselves. I mean, I've seen some web applications that made me want to commit hara-kiri, but usually because they had really poor UI. Look, I took away something very different from this article, and that was the importance. It made me rethink. You know, I participate in some open source projects, and it made me rethink how I handle GitHub PRs.
Yeah.
Like, do I really trust that this person is on the level that this submitter is doing this with good cause, and is it even real? Like am I being gamed here? And that's interesting. There have been open source projects, by the way, that have been compromised by social accounts that were built up over time by an AI. That looked like they were generating submits to active open source projects, but those were also curations of an AI. And what it did is it in a couple of cases allowed the attacker to convince the maintainer of a project that they weren't doing a good job and that they should give the open source project over to new maintainers. And then those new maintainers then began injecting spyware into the code. This is not a direct AI attack, but it's a social engineering attack that is made far more effective by AI, because you can generate essentially a full lexicon of things that you can use to make your position, the attacker's position, better. Generate believable things, and that has made me think differently about some of the check-ins I see.
Yeah.
And this is just one example, like, you know, check-ins and push requests in open source, but entirely AI generated personas at scale for all sorts of social engineering attacks are something we're going to have to be paying a lot more attention to over the next couple of years.
Yep.
Well, and trust. I mean, we talk about, you know, how can we trust the AI, but right. I mean, it's actually, I think it's going to get worse, right? I mean, it's already bad enough online. I don't know you, right? I don't know if you're a good person or bad. I don't know anything about you. And so you could manipulate me in social engineering. And now you have AI and you just add it. I think it's going to like erode that trust even more to where, you know, I have to like physically make sure you're an actual person and that's your communication.
What happens when seeing isn't believing?
Yeah.
That's essentially what we're facing.
Now we're back to Getty, where we started in the before show and the whole holographic squirrel in the tree. And do I know? And
right. Yeah. Aubrey, I'm looking so forward to having some positive AI next week. So forward.
It's going to happen.
There's a lot going on that's fantastic out there, and I have some great stuff for next week.
Well, we are going to do that next week. It'll be a blast, and it will be really on just a positive note. So let's. There are already the couple articles we've already got are pretty neat. So before we kind of get into that, I'm just going to say thank you guys so much for showing up. It's great to see you all on Friday, and I think we will probably bounce out of here in a moment.
Cool. Thank you, Aubrey. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, Aubrey.
You bet. And stick around here, Byron. We'll say goodbye to the community. So one more Friday in the books, man.
Awesome.
Glad we're doing it.
I was thinking about the article I presented because I'm like, oh man, I keep talking about all these jailbreaks and all this bad stuff, but it's not to incite fear. It's to really reinforce, like, hey, let's not forget about security fundamentals. I mean, you and I have talked about that extensively on webinars. You know, Chuck talks about it extensively with our customers. So that to me was the takeaway. It's not just like, oh my God, here's another bad thing. But yeah, I'm totally down for let's do something that's, definitely positive.
Well, we'll get it going. We I think got a new guest coming next week too, so we'll see if it really happens. But we may be joined by the infamous Corey Marshall. So for those of you that know him, awesome guy. A little bit of a loose cannon, so I'm concerned about my editing, but we'll see what happens with that.
Yeah,
I think it'll be fun. Anyways,
absolutely.
thank you.
And just like Chuck, he's got a lot of field experience, like what he's hearing, what he's seeing.
Exactly.
Yeah, definitely.
Exactly. And thank you for showing up every week too.
Yeah,
I
no,
appreciate it.
happy to be here. This is great.
Well, thank you, community. And, as always, we will see you again next Friday on AI Friday.
There you go. Keep it real.
We hope you liked this instantiation of AI Friday. We'll be instantiated again next week, same time, same place, and hope to again infer with you. Before we depart, promptly subscribe for all our content and click like to let us know you enjoyed AI Friday.